Hey, good morning. Scott Luton right here with you on the Supply Chain Buzz on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. So we're going to be flying solo. Who can raise your hand if you can relate to Murphy's Law, biting you at the last minute? So we'll see if we can't get Greg White to rejoin us later in the broadcast, but we were having a couple of connection issues. But nonetheless, we've got lots of news to tackle. We've got a wonderful special guest in Jon Gold with the National Retail Federation on the heels, of course, of the big show. We're going to get some of his key takeaways as well as some things to keep your finger on the pulse when it comes to trade. What a crazy environment we're in now. But hey, this is all about Supply Chain Buzz. Every Monday, 12 noon, we dive into some of the leading news stories and developments that you need to keep on your radar across really global business and certainly the global supply chain community. So before we say hello to a few folks, I want to share a couple of opportunities we've got. Speaking of professional development and keeping your finger on the pulse of what's taking place, I want to share a couple of things we've got coming up this week. It's a busy week here at Supply Chain Now. So tomorrow, we've got Dial P for procurement back with us with the one and only Kelly Barner. We're featuring a couple of very special guests from Schlumberger and Hicks and Jeff and Ragnar. So you don't want to miss that, especially if you love a good procurement conversation and great people. And Kelly Barner and our guests here, make sure you tune in 12 noon tomorrow for that. Wednesday, it's all about supply chain transformation with our friends from Mars and Kinaxis. Now, Greg and I had a wonderful prep session with Will and Ann and Patrick Van Hole last week. And you're not going to want to miss this conversation. Those supply chain transformations is kind of become cliche, right? There's so much talk about it, but you're going to hear from folks that are doing it and doing it very well. So you're not going to want to miss that webinar. You can sign up. I think we've got the links for that in the show notes. So check that out Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Thursday, we've got Greg White and a wonderful judges panel, founders. They're going to be pitching on our first Take Your Shot live stream. It's a special Tequila Sunrise offering. We're in 30 minutes time. We're going to have three entrepreneurs take their shot in 3 minutes each, talking about their value proposition and the opportunity with a panel of esteemed judges, including Cabrera Capital, RoadSync, and our friend Enrique Alvarez from Vector Global Logistics. So even if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not going to want to miss this, right? Because it is fascinating to watch, just peek into what takes place in startup environments, especially when they're looking for funding. And you're going to hear some really interesting business models from folks that have already had some early successes early on. So check that out, 12 noon on Thursday. And let's see here. So we had a wonderful, speaking of coming attractions and transformation for that matter, we sat down with two digital transformers last week in an interview that's going to be dropping on February 22nd. Nadia Vincent, author of the book Leveraging Digital Transformation, and of course, Kevin L. Jackson, author of Click to Transform. It was, if you're a non-technologist like me, it was like, it was a fascinating rock and roll, wild, wild west conversation. Tons of knowledge being dropped with folks that are technologists and experts in that space talking about digital transformation. So look for that video podcast to drop on the 22nd of February. I got one more. Let's see here. Looks like we got a lot of folks that have already tuned into the live stream. So we're going to say hello to a few folks here momentarily, but one last learning opportunity to talk about is this webinar with our friends at Omnia Partners. So they have assembled diverse, what an incredible panel of folks from a variety of different sectors, from Rent-A-Center to Ace Hardware, Parker Hannifin, you name it. And they're going to be talking about some of the supply chain challenges, in particular some procurement challenges and best practices in a very frank conversation. So tune in on February 23rd next week at 12 noon Eastern time. And I believe we've got the link to register in the show notes there. So with no further ado, let's see here. Let's say hello to a few folks here. We'll start from the top. So we've got Peter. Hey, Peter, great to see you. Look forward to connecting with you this coming Friday. David is with us. David, hopefully you're staying warm up in Canada. Gary Smith. So, Gary, hello, from Roslyn, New York, I believe is where you are. Really enjoyed your interview with Chris Barnes on Supply Chain is Boring. Amanda and Clay, let's see if we can't drop that in the show notes. But Gary is always a great interview, doing big things in supply chain in a public sector. So you don't want to miss that interview there. Let's see here. Mohammed via YouTube from Saudi Arabia. Great to have you back with us, Mohammed. Sophia, the resident supply chain ambassador. Sophia, congratulations on that big news as you took on a new role. Really excited to have you back with us soon and tell us all what you're learning and what you're leading. So I hope this finds you well. Sneha, great to see you, Sneha, this Monday morning. Noradine, great to have you back. Really enjoyed your contributions to our live stream with AME last week, the manufacturing focused live stream. Pierre, great to have you here via LinkedIn. Simon, Tom Raftery is with us. Tom, great work on Tech for Good and the Climate Change podcast and Digital Supply Chain. Tom, you must have a couple of clones helping you crank out that content. Then one final comment here. So Mark Preston. So Mark, hope this finds you well. So Mark is a big leader within, I mentioned AME earlier, the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. So Mark, I believe, leads a kind of like a leadership roundtable element to the AME group. So if manufacturing and manufacturing leadership, and especially lean, is right up your alley, make sure you connect with Mark. He's been doing great work in that space for years. So, all right. So we're going to move right along. So welcome, everybody. I look forward to hearing your commentary on a couple of these news stories that we're going to tackle here today. So let's get back into the first story here today. West Coast ports clogged up. Of course, that's nothing new. We've been tracking this for months now. But how hard are shipping companies going to be looking at other ports? Well, let me share a couple of highlights here. Costas Paris from the Wall Street Journal reports that some container lines are looking at alternatives, of course, for getting around that massive backup, that historic backup, according to some, on the West Coast. For example, France's CMA, CGM, SA, which is a bunch of acronyms, by the way, but also the number 4 largest container operator in the world. It's already rerouting some of its traffic to Oakland and Seattle. The Port of Long Beach says that the waiting time to get to dock can be up to 7 days, depending on the ship type. Demand for inventory, of course, is a big driver, as is COVID-19, because the pandemic, of course, has reduced the number of available cargo handlers. Analysts, this is not good news, but analysts aren't expecting it to get any better anytime soon. In fact, some are projecting it's going to be like this at least through the first half of 2021. So massive disruptions there, massive backlog. In a related note, my brother, who is down in Antigua, he sent me a picture over the weekend. I should have grabbed it for the live stream, because even in Antigua, they're seeing backup in their ports. And this article from Mr. Paris there also speaks to how other ports are experiencing a lot of similar challenges. So I tell you, don't like starting off with less than good news, but hey, at least it's going to be interesting to see how these companies kind of find a way to get their product to the market. Let's see if there's any comments here. So Tom, back to clones. So Tom says, it's all me, Scott, but if you know of anyone who could clone me, send them on. Hey, Tom, if I find one, I promise to share. And if you find one, please share back the other way. David is talking about we've got to consider the cost of additional overlanding when we do that, meaning go to different ports. Great point, David. And in fact, they were talking about that total cost of ownership end to end when we make changes when it comes to different ports. Let's see. Anna Mary, great to have you here on the live stream today. She's part of the Supply Chain City here in Atlanta. David also says some of the rates on those lanes are over the moon. I agree, David. We have heard lots of nightmare stories as folks are looking at different options. Sophia says, how could we start solving this? Let's brainstorm solutions for this container headache. I'm with you, Sophia. We've got to figure out a way to break through. Now, along those lines, let's see here. I think I've got a little snapshot here. Oh, well, this comes from Michael Avra, who also, there's no shortage of content reporting around the port slowdown, especially on the West Coast. He cherry picked this article, sent it to me, and he added his commentary. I want to read that here for folks that may be picking up on the replay of the live stream. So Mike Avra says, you guys have touched on this topic a lot about ports and SoCal being backed up. This creates huge opportunities for ports in our neck of the woods like Savannah and Jacksonville and Charleston. Only question is with this glaring bottleneck, which, by the way, is affecting order fulfillment. The question, will this lead companies to investigate bringing production back to either North or Central America? Rail lines between Central and North America do not go through large population hubs, allowing for quicker turns between rail yards and warehouses. End quote. Great commentary there from Mike Avra. And I want to share one more thing, and I'm going to get to some of the comments here. I'll tell you who's a great follow on Twitter is Paul Page. And I caught this snippet. So just how bad is it? Well, they still have Christmas ornaments coming into the ports. That's how great the backlogs are, as Paul Page was quoting an interview from CNBC. So really, it's not a pretty picture. So let's take some of these other comments here. Let's see here. David says, step one, stop dropping them in the ocean. And of course, David is referencing all the lost containers, well above monthly averages we've seen. Thousands of containers have already been lost. And some folks, as folks in the comments and the community may already know, some of the causes are there's so much demand, they're stacking these containers, they're maxing them out. And of course, the taller you get, the more challenges you might have. So, that's just one of the numerous reasons for these lost containers. Larry Klein, who's based down in South Georgia. Great to have you here with us, Larry. What about the East Coast? California isn't the only answer. It's a great question. And the article speaks to some of the different ports that are being used. And I think we'll see if she's going to be with us here today. But Sylvia talks about how much room there is in Charleston, for example. Of course, Savannah, one of the fastest growing ports in North America, is handling more and more volume as well. So we'll see. But, when you go from West Coast to East Coast, as David and others are pointing out, it completely changes total cost. So we'll see we shall see some decisions and repercussions be made. Christmas ornaments is happening earlier every year, Tom says. Agreed. David, monthly. Yearly numbers are already out of the water. That's right, David. That's right. I think we've already lost more containers than are typically lost in an entire year. So great point there. Travis Kent says, I like the idea of bringing some production and manufacturing back to North and Central America to mitigate global issues like this in the future. Excellent point. Larry, that's a great question. There were some comments in one of the last live streams about the ability to track the containers based on, of course, different sensors we're using. I'm not familiar with the salvage operations. I did see one story, though, where over a $200 million insurance claim was being processed. So in that one case, that leads me to believe that there's not a tremendous salvage opportunity, but great point there. Pierre says, skip the ports and keep the focus on reshoring of manufacturing where we can. No silver bullet or new concept, but can incrementally improve the import backlog over time. Excellent point. And one final question, I'll pose this to our community here. Gary says, what is the capacity of the Panama Canal? Is it reaching capacity? And that's a great question, Gary. We'll see if anyone can speak to that in the comments here. Kim Winter, great to see you here, Kim. Great to see you here, and enjoyed our conversations and enjoy all the goodness, the good stuff you're putting out on social, including interviewing some of the movers and shakers across global business. So great to have you here with us, Kim. All right, so let's keep driving. I've got a couple other things I want to share. Again, we've got Jon Gold with the National Retail Federation joining us here in about 10 minutes. So y'all sit tight. Jon is in demand in his perspective. He keynotes and speaks regularly on things happening across supply chain, across trade, and he's always a great interview. So y'all sit tight for Jon Gold's appearance. But let's cover a few more stories here. Let's see. Let's move to these quick hits here. So first off, so the White House is weighing in. You know, we've talked a lot about the computer chip, the semiconductor shortage, right? It's impacting everywhere, especially automotive, where production lines are getting shut down. So from Industry Week here, the White House is looking to weigh in to the semiconductor shortage. President Biden is looking to use executive orders to find supply and find workarounds. We've also talked about here in recent weeks, I believe, not Dell. There are already a couple plants, a couple chip production plants in the States that are already breaking ground. Austin is about to gain a big one from, I think it was Panasonic. No, Samsung is looking to break ground in Austin at I believe, a 7 million square foot facility to produce chips. So there's a couple things, but, you know, those plants don't come online for years. So we're going to see what the White House can come up with using executive orders to find supply. Also, let's see, according to CNBC, Under Armour is looking to pull out of some 2,000 to 3,000 stores. It's looking to sell directly to more consumers and get around the middle folks, right, to boost margins. I think Nike was doing some similar things here in the last year or so. And according to Supply Chain Dive, so on top of, let's see here, chips and masks and natural gloves, all these shortages, well, aluminum cans are continuing to get harder and harder to find for some, at least. Ball Corporation expects demand to outstrip supply well into 2023. Holy cow. Now, on the other side of things, Molson Coors says they should get back to normal in terms of supply by the end of Q1 as it has expanded its sourcing initiatives. So kind of a mixed message there. Let's take some comments here from our community. Let's see. We'll go back a ways here. So Larry says, supply chain big guns need to push the point with higher ed. Do we need to sit through 4 years of school? ? And drive curriculum at the top schools. That's a great comment, Larry. The good news here, while there's always, we need to make awareness of supply chain careers and dissemination of supply chain management curriculum, you know, we got plenty of opportunity there. However, in recent years, we are seeing more programs come online. I think here in the States, I believe we've got more than 500 4-year programs, 2-year programs, you name it. So it is growing, but as you point out, we have a lot more that we could, a lot more opportunities to get more people in the pipeline and get excited about supply chain management careers. No doubt. Nick Rumor. Hope this finds you well. Make sure you're following Nick on LinkedIn. He's got a daily dose of leadership and marketing and the grind that you'll enjoy. Nick says retail will continue to develop and change completely. We've seen it time and time again, Nick, already. I think, and Jon will speak to that here momentarily, but it's been a fascinating study of the retail industry here, you know, going back a year and some change, not only on the retailer side and the management side and leadership and you name it, but the consumer side. You know, I look at my family members and my friends and look at how they're shifting and frankly, our household, how we engage and purchase and consume. All that is evolving. It's a fascinating mix of business and maybe a psychological study. And of course, we should mention as well as always, the heroes across the frontline workforce and across the supply chain and the retail, of course, healthcare workforce that are helping us navigate through this crazy time, this challenging time, while being able to get our hands on the things we need. So whether that's retail clerks in stores stocking shelves and manning the point of sale station, or of course the army of e-commerce workers. I mean, those folks and what they're doing should be front and center. So, okay, let's share a few more comments here. Let's see, Adrian, Larry Klein. Unfortunately, in today's life, that's not enough to get a job in supply chain. That's interesting social commentary. They want more, I reckon. Andrea says, Sophia made me fall in love with supply chain, and who knows, maybe I'll join her. So I love that. Sophia and Andrea, I believe, are twin sisters, of course, and they've got different loves in life. I think Andrea, if I'm not mistaken, you're in the entertainment industry. Sophia was telling us some of the videos and I think a documentary that you were shooting. But hey, if we can get you and people with your talent in the supply chain, we will take it. Mark Preston says AME is starting many student chapters to get students and professors a more understanding of careers in supply chain manufacturing. I love that. And, we need more of that to take place for sure. Sneha says COVID really influenced the consumer buying patterns, hoping to see more awareness on the circularity front. I agree with you, Sneha. We've had a couple of recent conversations with Deborah Dole, who's doing some wonderful things in that awareness of circular economy and circularity conversations. So we completely agree with you. Okay, so no shortage of comments and points of view. Y'all keep it coming because we've got a great guest that I want to bring into the stream now. So fortunately, he's a repeat guest. We've enjoyed interviewing Jon Gold a couple of different times, but let's bring him into the stream. Jon Gold, Vice President, Supply Chain and Customs Policy at the National Retail Federation. Good morning, Jon. How you doing?
Hey, Scott. How are you? Good to see you.
Hey, I think the internet is not liking this Monday morning. Hey, sometimes we all wake up on the wrong side of the bed. But Jon, great to reconnect with you.
You too.
So, we've really enjoyed your perspective. Going back to, I think our first interview of you was in person. Imagine that, out in Vegas, where you were keynoting with the Reverse Logistics Association with our dear friend Tony Shirota. What a great organization that is. And we've been fortunate to sit down with you a couple times since. Now, today, Jon, what we want to start with is we're just a few weeks ago, I guess the NRF wrapped up the big show, chapter 1 of the big show at least. And I don't know about you, but we got a ton of feedback about the different sessions, the speakers, the networking, the exchange of views. It's always a home run. But let's start here, Jon. What were some of your key takeaways from the big show here this year so far?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Always appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And unfortunately, your cohort was not able to get online today. But hopefully next time I'll see Greg as well. Obviously the big show was a little bit different this year. Not being able to do it in person, we did it virtual over 6 days. And had, I think, over 20,000 retailers and industry vendors, 330 speakers, 100 different sessions over 6 days. I mean, it was just phenomenal. The level of speakers we had, everybody from, former Secretary Condoleezza Rice, Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, Marvin Ellison, who's the, president CEO of Lowe's, as well as a host of others. And I think, the overarching message, I think there were a couple of key themes that we were looking at. First and foremost, obviously, tackling the issues related to COVID and response, recovery, and the role of retail within that. Right. How we're dealing with our employees, our workforce, how we're ensuring that they are safe in their environment, and then how we're dealing with the customer and that evolution of retail that we've seen over almost a year now that we've been kind of in this COVID environment. And then kind of that change that we've seen quickly. I think, early on we were saying we saw, 5 months worth of innovation or 5 years worth of innovation in the first 5 months. And that innovation continues today. Right. As you saw retailers with the ongoing threat of the lockdown, those who were deemed as non-essential that had to shut their doors basically, that had to look to e-com to continue to keep their business going. And they did that. Right. And you looked at the consumers, how they were now shifting to e-commerce. Buy online, pick up in store has exploded. BOPUS, yeah. I mean, everybody loves BOPUS now. So, it's amazing. But, again, focusing on kind of that COVID response and recovery, looking at leadership in the time of crisis, which is essentially what we're in, and how are you as a leader pushing forwards and ensuring that your workforce and consumers are safe and you can continue to evolve. And then just looking at the retail environment as a whole going forward. I mean, there are a lot of challenges retail was facing prior to COVID that they're now continuing to push on going forwards. And that, some of the comments you were making earlier, that supply chain transformation, supply chain has never been at the forefront of the retail enterprise as it is today. and will continue to be for quite a while. And you know, the articles you were discussing earlier, I mean, we could spend, you know, days talking about all those issues and how they impact retail. But, you know, I think for us looking at the big show, you know, it really was a fantastic event. You know, when you look at how everybody's going virtual, just the level of speaker, the content, the discussion. The other issue too that really retail is really focusing in on now is the whole D&I, diversity and inclusion. That has been a central part of what retailers have been working on as well, and bringing that into the organization now as well is kind of front and center. So
in a real meaningful way.
That's right. That's right.
Agree with you, and we've learned a ton from a variety of guests of different best practices for, you know, taking real action on that, not just lip service, and that that has been a silver lining to all of this, as has the recognition of the workforce in general, what they do. And then going back to John, I'd love for you to weigh in on this. One of the observations we had, and it played out in a variety of the big show NRF conversations, is just how that the equilibrium in terms of who holds the leverage has really shifted over to the consumer, and it is fascinating. I've just been constantly amazed at how a tweet will get an enterprise to fix a customer experience here or a defect here. It's nothing short of amazing, isn't it?
No, it is. And you look at how connected we are, you know, right now in the universe. I mean, that social change really helps to push, and just that interconnectivity. A tweet, an Instagram post, a Facebook post. I mean, everybody's looking at social media these days, and it really has an impact on how you do your business. And I think retailers are very responsive to their customers. I mean, you just look at the consumer demand we've seen throughout COVID. I mean, it has been incredible, and it continues today. Right. So I think, you know, retailers are responding and trying to make sure they have the right product mix, the availability, and are doing it in a socially conscious way, which is what the consumer is demanding these days.
Right. Well, you know, going back to the shipping challenges and the backlog, one of the big drivers there, of course, or one of the many drivers that retailers, you know, filling back up their inventories, right? And we were going to snag this article, and then we were tackling some of these technology challenges earlier, but you were quoted in terms of, you know, kind of a forward-looking statement. Supply Chain Dial is one of our favorite resources around here. You were quoted in a recent article, quote, "The import numbers we're seeing reflect retailers' expectations for consumer demand to the point that many factories in Asia that normally close for Chinese New Year this month are remaining open to keep up," end quote. So this tidal wave, the tsunami, is just going to keep coming. I think whoever was quoted as saying, you know, first half of the year, I think that might be one of the easiest predictions to make, John.
No, I mean, we're in Lunar New Year now, and this is typically when, you know, the factories will shut down and you can kind of recoup and reset, and we're not seeing that right now. You know, factories are buzzing for that, not just the replenishment, but just the demand that continues today. And that obviously has an impact on our ports, both imports and exports, as we're seeing all kinds of issues with the backlogs of, you know, on the vessels, backlogs on the containers on port, the lack of empty containers for overseas, you know, exports are being hit because of that. So there are challenges throughout the entire supply chain right now. And, you know, we'd love to come back and have that discussion on a future show, because I think there are some things that we've been working on or trying to work on for years to address the congestion issues. It seems every couple of years we run into a situation where we've got, you know, the ports are backlogged. How do we address that and truly make a 21st century port system that looks holistically at the system from beginning to end, and not just individually at each segment? But we need more transparency and visibility into the system. We've got to address the equipment issues. And then, I mean, the biggest issue right now is just the frontline workers, the longshoremen and the truckers. They need to get the vaccinations now. I mean, they are critical to the economy continuing to move, because if we don't have the folks working at the ports, the economy, you know, won't be able to recover.
Excellent point. You shared so much goodness there. Excellent point. And, you know, hopefully we'll continue to see gains made in the vaccine distribution. I know Greg points this out a lot, and it's been front and center how the U.S., it's one country, but you got 50 different governments, and that's just at the state level. And it really has shared a variety of different best practices and practices to avoid when it comes to distribution of the vaccines. So we'll have to have you back. And for that matter, talk on the greater note of infrastructure. There's a lot of conversations right now around infrastructure. Jon, before we shift over to trade, I want to share a couple of wide-ranging comments from our community here. They always bring it. It's one of my favorite parts about these live streams. Let's see here. This is going back a ways to some of the earlier topics, but Larry says, what I've learned in my military career was sharpened in school. I feel my degree and experience finally gave me a leg up. Excellent point, Larry. Sophia, talking about circular economy. She agrees with Sneha. We got to find ways to accelerate the implementation curve of circular economy strategies to catch up with the speed at which industries, example retail, are growing. Excellent point. And Jon, going back to, we need a 21st century solution to so much, right? AA from the air capital of the world in Wichita, Kansas says, I'm getting my 14-year-old daughter into supply chain. I explained the basics on the dinner table the other night. A lot more dinner conversation is needed. Hey, AA, if you're like me, my daughters are going to be teaching me that the tables have turned. I learn a ton from our three kids here for sure. Let's see here. So y'all make sure you check this out. So I was talking earlier about Andrea and some of the things she's up to. She's had a TED Talk and she made it convenient and dropped it in the comments. So y'all check out her thoughts. Andrea, if you can, give us a quick in the comments synopsis of what you addressed in your TED Talk. Andrea also says, she's reading my mind. It's about transcendence in life and how you can achieve it. She wants to send us a transcript in English. So do that. Amanda, if you can make that easy, make sure she's got a good point of contact there. Scrolling down a bit here, Gary Smith says, retail was always my first supply chain love. I spent my first 10 years in retail. It always seems to lead the way. Absolutely agree, especially, Jon, as you pointed out, throughout the pandemic here. Andrea says the vaccine distribution must be targeted to the economically active population. Great point there. Tom says, though, but after the vulnerable population, the frontline workers, is what he adds, which, Jon, you're kind of speaking to. And one final point from Jon. Let's see here. Tom Rafter mentioned somewhere, I can't find his comment, but the tweet approach to fixing things doesn't always work. He was sharing a recent example where it didn't quite work for him. So Mark Preston's got a question for you, Jon, and we can always take this offline, but he asked your thoughts on the Made in America strategy currently in retail. Anything to add to that, Jon?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of retailers that are looking at Made in America, looking at onshoring. I mean, this has been a topic of conversation for years and decades. Obviously, with the ongoing trade relations with China, which I know we'll get into in a little bit, a lot of folks looked at shifting their supply chains. Scott, as you noted, it's not that easy to shift your supply chain. It takes months, potentially years to make that shift, and finding the available skilled workforce to do that is a challenge. I think folks are looking and trying to do what they can, but you can't move everything back here, unfortunately. We just don't have the ability to do that. I think folks are moving what they can, how they can, but you can't move everything, unfortunately. Agreed.
And Mark, it's always a fascinating question, and Jon, I appreciate you weighing in. I think what we have seen, especially earlier in 2020, there's a strong demand. They were looking for congressional roundtables and immediate action. However, one of my favorite points I keep bringing back up, because all of us are consumers, is that we still really care about price. We still really care about price. And one of the reasons that global supply chains exist is because of those sensitivities as consumers. So while undoubtedly we've already seen reshoring and nearshoring initiatives take place, and that's a great thing, right? Everyone wants a strong economy, and in your country or your neighboring countries, of course, the special opportunity we have across the North American markets. But regardless, until we don't care about price constraints and those global supply chains are going to exist for many, many reasons. But hey, we'll see. It's always a great conversation to be had for sure. All right, so let's talk about. Perfect segue into trade, John. I'll tell you, I bet your phone, I know it, has been ringing off the hook. As someone that an expert on trade matters and follows that closely, it's. I want to say exciting time, but I don't want to put the wrong spin on it. It's been an action-packed trade time frame. So, John, give us some things to keep our finger on the pulse of when it comes to trade in the months ahead.
Yeah, I mean, trade has certainly been front and center for the past 5 years now. As a quote unquote trade nerd, I always wanted trade kind of front and center. I wish it was more on the offensive as opposed to defensive position. Obviously over the past, throughout the last administration had to deal a lot with, the tariffs and kind of the negative on trade. We certainly hope looking at the new administration, there'll be a renewed focus on trade. It won't be the primary focus. Obviously the administration has already said they're, the initial 100 days and probably longer is going to be focused on COVID and economic recovery. But to be honest, trade's got to be a part of that dialogue as well. We've got to make sure that we're able to import and export, and we knock down the barriers to keep that happening. So the best thing that can help move our economy forwards and help our small and medium-sized companies, especially our manufacturers, get rid of the tariffs. Dump the tariffs that have been put in place, because that puts an extra tax and burden on those companies, whether it's from the China tariffs, whether it's the steel and aluminum tariffs. You mentioned earlier the article on the aluminum shortage.
Right.
Part of that is due to the tariffs that companies have to pay. So, that's certainly something that we have been working on for the past couple of years and will continue to work on. We think there is a better way to go about addressing the challenges with China. We certainly know, China has, there are a lot of challenges with the China trade relationship, whether it's on the trade front, the IP theft and things like that, which we certainly agree need to be addressed. The human rights issues, a lot in the news on the horrible situation in Xinjiang, and the need to address those issues. Those are going to continue to be there, but we can't continue to do it as a U.S.-only approach, U.S. alone. We've got to engage our allies to be able to do that. And to do that, we've got to address some of the trade situations that we have. So again, that's the steel and aluminum tariffs on our European trading partners, as well as others. So those are certainly front of mind for us on getting the U.S. back to the global leadership on trade issues. This administration has said they want to focus on a worker-centric trade policy. We certainly welcome that, but we want to know exactly what does that mean. Are we looking at, workers based on manufacturing from how it was done in the 1950s, which isn't there anymore? Or looking at, the 21st century trade and workers, and just look at the e-commerce boom we've seen over the past year and how incredibly important those supply chain jobs are, and the e-commerce and all of that. So I think, we've got to look at how do we push forward and tell the positives of trade, both imports and exports, because they rely on each other. And I think that's where, your audience can help tell that story about those jobs that are associated with trade that people might not ordinarily think about. Just because you don't make a product here doesn't mean that some part of U.S. industry wasn't involved in the manufacture of that good, whether it's on the development, the R&D, the customs, the transportation, all those internal processes, which are critical to the movement of the global supply chain.
Well said, John. And there's a lot. I'm fighting myself from taking a deep dive.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I just wish we had 3 hours with you every day, by the way. So let me share a couple of comments here. So Peter, ding, ding, ding. Good luck with the Buy USA first. Price is king, and it's why Amazon rules today. Thank you. Interesting commentary there from Peter. Tom says, hey, I work from home. I'll happily wait until all the frontline and vulnerable workers get their vaccines before I get mine. Good point there from Tom. David says $20 will always be $20. Interesting, David, because I would argue that while the numbers on the dollar bill or the bill doesn't change, the value of it certainly changes and fluctuates quite a bit. But nevertheless, David, I appreciate you sharing. Let's see here. Going back to kind of curriculum, supply chain careers. Travis says, supply chain now, I agree. Unfortunately, I know the school I recently graduated from is phasing their supply chain logistics program out, which seems contradictory to the direction the field is heading. Travis, that's interesting. If that's the case, I'd love to know what part of the country it's located in, because that is definitely that's a they're making a counter. It's like a headwind move. Is what they're making by phasing that program out. It would seem to me. Now, John, we were just talking about price, and there's lots of comments here going back to Davins. Lots of great comments here going back to Davins and others. Mark's earlier. Larry says it's all about the trade-offs. Who can get it to me on time and in the right configuration? That is always more important than price to me. Now, John, I'd love for you to get you to weigh in here, but really quick, I wish I had the graphic. So CSCMP, right? The Council Supply Chain Management Professionals, I believe is what that acronym stands for. Great group, great voice across supply chain. They conducted a study, I want to say within the last 2 years. And one of their, and they surveyed hundreds of consumers and supply chain professionals and many others. One of the key takeaways there, John, was that the majority of them thought that customer experience would replace price as a number one priority in like just the next couple of years. I can't remember the time frame, but it really was a stark data point because we're hearing more and more about CX, right? Customer experience. John, can you weigh in and speak to that and price and kind of the changing consumer priorities maybe?
Yeah, I mean, that consumer experience is critical. And I know that's what a lot of retailers have been focusing in on. And obviously in COVID times, it's a little bit different how that consumer experience is. But I think a lot of folks are looking at how do you replicate that in-store in an online environment, which is a challenge. But again, this is where that ramp up of technology and innovation is certainly happening. I think for the consumer, price will always be a part of it, but making sure that, your store that you always go to, always has the product on the shelf that you need is critical. But making sure you have that full on experience in store or online is critical. I think for the retailer, again, on the sourcing side, it's not just about the finding the cheapest product to make. That's just not what it's all about anymore. It's you want to make sure that they are making the product to your specifications, which are the consumer specifications, what the consumer wants. Do they have the capacity to do it? Do they have the right workforce to do it? There's so many other challenges with the supply chain as a whole that it's not just about chasing the cheapest good. That's just not the way it works anymore. But that consumer experience, that customer experience is critical. And as we talked about earlier on with the interconnectivity through the social channels now, it's even more important now when you get that instant review about how that consumer experience works.
Right. Everybody wants a good review, right? Well, that's a wonderful thing though, because that democratic element to consumer voice is I love that about how transparent we can be about the consumer experience and reviews of products and services and whatnot. Let me share a couple quick comments. Now, John, if I can give you a heads up, right before we have you leave, of course, we want to connect you and make sure we let our community know how to connect with NRF. But I want to talk NFL just for a second. I want to get your thoughts on the Super Bowl. I know Greg was going to bring it up anyway. So Mark says, let's start with Peter first. Peter says, I paid more for a product improvement that resulted in 35% savings due to 100% of product usage versus 50% prior that was for an abrasive product. Twist lock versus Velcro. And then Mark follows that up and says, I agree, Peter. Data will lead the way. Excellent point, Mark. Harry Mosier with reshorenow.org has got a TCO data tool. Probably not all makes sense, but some do. Data first. I'm with you, Mark. Data first. Let's see here. Larry said cheaper to buy may cost more in the long run. And then David followed up on our comment about $20. That's the key to it, Scott. He says you have to make that $20 savings worth less on the whole than a $20 gain. Excellent point, David. Excellent point. Sounds like you do that week in and week out in your supply chain leadership role. So Travis says Metro Atlanta is where that university was located that is ramping down or phasing out its logistics/supply chain program. Travis, we gotta work on that. Atlanta, as you probably know, Atlanta is such a wonderful supply chain hub that there's going to be a lot more opportunity here. So we're gonna have to have a conversation or two. Pierre says, unfortunately, price is evident and available. Consumer confidence / experience can be a moving target. Well said there, Pierre. Okay. Lots of passionate POV in the comments, as always. And John, I appreciate yours as well. Not only is it educated, but it's very passionate. And I love how you've got your finger on the pulse of so much across business and supply chain. So let's make sure, before I ask you a question or two about the NFL, let's make sure folks know how to connect with you, John, and NRF. And we've got Chapter 2 of the big show coming up in June 2021, which is going to be virtual as well. How can folks connect with you and NRF?
Sure. So, easiest way is my email address. It's goldj@nrf.com. So last name, first initial @nrf.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter @JonGoldDC. So I think those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. And just real quick, Scott, on the education front, we'd love to have our foundation folks come on and talk to you about all the work we're doing on the education side on retail. Supply chain really has become a big part of what we've been doing. It's been part of our student program for the past couple of years, and really just trying to highlight the opportunity for the retail supply chain and the need for it, and showing the tech folks, hey, it's not just about technology, but retail supply chain is a big part of that. So we'd love to talk to you about getting some of our folks on to talk about that as well.
Love that. In fact, John, if my memory serves me right, I think I saw some scholarships being handed out at the big show.
That's right.
Is that part of that foundation?
It is. I think we did over $100,000 in scholarships this year. So it's the foundation work we do with students is just absolutely amazing. It's unfortunate because we always have a student program tied to the big show. Last year, I think there were over 800 students that had participated. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year, but hopefully be back in January 2022 in New York City as part of that program.
Hey, we all look forward to getting back. I was talking with Ben Harris with the Metro Atlanta Chamber this morning, as a matter of fact, and we were just talking about how we miss just the randoms. You sit down for a cup of coffee before an event, or you grab a sandwich, or for that matter, we're big people watchers. I love going to kind of the town square around the corner from where we live, and just watching little interactions, and I miss all of that. But we're going to get back, and we're going to be enjoying big events like the big show at the Javits Center here sooner rather than later, hopefully. So we're going to wrap up today talking about sports a little bit. So folks, I know we just wrapped up what to some was a disappointing Super Bowl. Certainly the Greg White, and I'm not trying to pour salt in his wound by any means, because as a Clemson fan, we've had a tough college football playoffs experience here lately as well. But I'd love for folks that are still in the comments, I'd love to find out if you're a big NFL fan and who your team is. So y'all drop that in the comments if you would. But John, if memory serves me well, you're a big Miami Dolphins fan. Is that right?
That is correct. Okay.
And I can't remember the backstory there, but I think you were kind of growing up like I did when Dan Marino and the Clayton brothers.
That's right.
Right? The Marks brothers, Mark Duper and Mark Clayton.
Yep.
We're doing big things. That was always an exciting game, in the 80s and early 90s, right? Now, who's going to be give us some predictions. I know there's some new quarterback talent down there in Miami. Deshaun Watson, of course, I'm a huge fan of Deshaun Watson. It's been rumored he's going to go somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think? What do you look? What give us a projection for the Dolphins in the years to come?
I think folks were excited when with the drafting of Tua. He showed, right, I think, some promise through the season. We had a good run at the back end. I think our defense was amazing. Back end after the season, fell apart in a couple of games, but I think there's some good, looking good for next year. I wish I had a crystal ball to know whether or not Deshaun Watson is going to end up with the Dolphins or not, but.
That'd be intriguing.
It'll be intriguing. We've got some good draft picks, so I think the Dolphins will be in the market for making some moves. It's been a little challenging to watch NFL with two young children now, so I wasn't able to watch as much of the games as I would like. But hopefully next season I'll be able to catch more of the games, and hopefully have a better Dolphins season next year.
Well, and to that point, hopefully, I'm a bandwagon Atlanta Falcons fan. I've never been a hardcore NFL fan. But, we've enjoyed the Falcons in recent years. It's been a little tougher. But it's great when they're winning, where you got more incentive to catch more games and give up that 3.5, 4 hours every Sunday or every game. So
hey, I've had Matty Ice as my quarterback on fantasy for the past few years, so I've always liked him.
Hey, a lot of folks forget. So when Tommy Bowden was at Clemson, it was when Matt Ryan was at Boston College. So he was breaking my heart. Clemson could not get to the championship game because of Matt Ryan. I had to go through BC. So it's interesting to kind of go from there to where you're rooting for him as a bandwagon Falcons fan as I am. Let's share a few folks here. So Nick says he's a huge NFL fan. Nick, tell us who's your team? I'd love to find that out. David is a big Saints fan. I never knew David. See, the Saints, Drew Brees is reportedly giving up his comp because it looks like he's going to be retiring. So we'll see who replaces that legend there. Andrea is a big fan of the NFL. Tell me your team, please. Simon says oval ball game, rugby. So, hey, rugby's a tough game, not for the faint of heart. Peter says, I'm a fan, but not real team preference. He loved the 70s and 80s, Dallas teams, Oakland Steelers, Oilers, the Houston Oilers teams. I loved Warren Moon and those Oilers teams. The Bills, of course, the Bills, John, when the Bills made it to the Super Bowl 4 straight years in the early 90s, that's a great ESPN, what's it called? That documentary,
30 for 30.
Yeah, 30 for 30. Yes, if you hadn't seen that one yet, it's awesome. Especially now with it adds a different twist and context as Jim Kelly bows through his health challenges. Such a great story there. AA Kansas City Chiefs will be back to win it all next year. I agree. Travis says forever disappointed Falcons fan. Although I love our new front office and coaching hires, hopefully Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot can turn around our culture of blowing leads. Travis, even as a bandwagon fan, that Super Bowl where the Patriots came back, that will haunt us forever, won't it? That'll be like some of those Braves, the Atlanta Braves, and in particular the '96 World Series when the Braves had a 2-1 lead against the Yankees, and they were close to moving to 3-1, and Jim Leyritz hit a 3-run bomb off Mark Wohlers. Will forever haunt us because that should have been back-to-back, 95 and 96. But nevertheless, Andreas says we should talk about F1. Scott Luton. Hey, I wish I knew more about F1. It's popular across the world, so we'll have to tee up a conversation around that. All right, so John, thank you for being a good sport as we wrap up on Monday afternoon here on the live stream on the Supply Chain Buzz. Really appreciate all that you do. I love the beyond all the work the NRF does for the industry. I love hearing about the good work they're doing to help those that are there, moving into the industry. There's so much work to be done there. Big thanks. So if you had one final question for you, John, if you had one thing, and you may not, as busy as you are, Chapter 2 of NRF in June, it may not have hit your reading radar yet, but is there one keynote or one element to that you're looking forward to that folks should know so that they can go ahead and register?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on the agenda now. So I think what we're looking at for Chapter 2 is really bringing together all the retail communities to talk about the continuing to push forward. So everything from just on the leadership side to continuing recovery from COVID, supply chain, loss prevention, digital, all the different elements of retail that continue to make it go, and how do we continue to push forwards for the industry. Despite what you heard previously about the retail apocalypse, retail is alive and well and doing better now than in the past. So, this is what I think we're going to focus on for Chapter 2 moving forwards.
John, how can you do that to me? I'd forgotten about that phrase, retail apocalypse. I should have moved that to the front of our conversation, but that's a great spot. It's a great spot to leave and kind of wrap the conversation on some good news. So there's so many great stories, despite the challenging circumstances, a ton of great stories of retailers that have put change in a headlock and taken quick and swift action to better serve consumers and to protect our psyche. Let us keep getting stuff we need as we work our way through the quarantines and social distancing and everything else. So huge pleasure as always to speak with Jon Gold, Vice President, Supply Chain and Customs Policy at National Retail Federation. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it as always.
You bet. All right. Even the swoosh has begun to wake up a little bit. I didn't know if Jon was going to come into the stream or not on the front end of that interview. It's always exciting on the buzz. But nevertheless, see what I've told y'all. I tell you, Jon Gold brings these, just like everyone in the comments. They bring it each and every single live stream. One of my favorite interviews with Jon. And, we could have easily dove into various aspects of what he shared if we just had more time. It's never enough time on Mondays. All right, as we wrap here, I want to share a couple of these comments here. See, we started talking football and everything just blew up. Let's see here. Jim Weber says, "Who dat? Drew Brees, pound for pound, the best quarterback of all time." Now, Jim, that's a very strong comment there, especially on the heels of seeing Tom Brady do what he did in the Super Bowl. And again, I'm not pouring salt in anyone's wounds there, but there'd be a great debate. I mean, sure, if you look at statistics in particular, right, Drew Brees is incredible, undoubtedly. However, if you look at championships, some would argue that's what governs who truly is the GOAT. Nick, it looks like you're a Saints fan as well. And by the way, again, Drew Brees won clearly an arguable case for the best of all time, and certainly one of them. David says Edmonton Oilers all the way. We're talking hockey, F1, football, you name it. Let's see here. Share. Simon says discussing the complexity versus simplicity of supply chains in sport, where point is the delivery point, is very interesting. Simon, well put. I think sports. There's so many great sports analogies that apply across not just global supply chain, but global business. AA says, cool, the swoosh is back. Now we need some live music. Hey, AA, we're working on that. We are working on some more live music here in the buzz. All right, so Jim weighs back in. Breeze beat Brady twice this past season. Hey, Jim, you make a great point. And head-to-head numbers are certainly important. I love these conversations where there's so much to look at when we're debating the best, truly the best of all time, right? All right, so that we're going to have to wrap things up here today. Wide-ranging edition of the buzz, from some curveballs, from some technical glitches, to a wonderful guest and appearance and conversation with Jon Gold, to a little bit of sports on this, depending on where you are here in the Atlanta area. It's pretty chilly and it's wet. It's been raining, I think, throughout the weekend. But hopefully this finds you safe and warm wherever you are. Really appreciate everybody tuning in and joining us here today. Hey, quick heads up. If you enjoy this conversation, be sure to check us out at supplychainnow.com. Working hard to serve as a voice of global supply chain. And be sure to find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to, these conversations, which we publish just about every day. Certainly Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday, sometimes Sunday, kind of depending on how that production schedule is working. But you can find us at Supply Chain Now, wherever you get your podcasts from. Subscribe for free, and we'll offer you a money-back guarantee on our content and our shows. All right, so thanks so much. Appreciate everybody. It's great to see everybody. Big thanks to Jon Gold and NRF for being a part of today's show. Big thanks to Clay and Amanda and Natalie behind the scenes. And of course, all of y'all that in the comments and the community that showed up and shared your POV on this Monday morning. It is highly, highly appreciated. So on that note, on behalf of our entire team here, Scott Luton wishing all of you nothing but the best. Hey, do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.